Okay, we're recording.
Okay. We'll start right at 7. We've already continued 20 Graff Road, right?
Correct.
So disappointed I don't get to see all you guys in person tonight.
Oh, sorry, Lisa.
I wore a suit and everything, Joe.
Jeez.
You're wasting that suit on us.
Never, Steve, never.
Okay. So we will start when my computer says 7. Hmm, My computer says 7. All right, then, let's bring this meeting to order. This is the Newburyport Conservation Commission meeting taking place on a Zoom platform. This meeting is being recorded. Uh, First item on the agenda, certificates of compliance, etc. We have 20 Henry Graff Road, which has been continued to February 17th. And we'll open the public hearing for 5 Basin Street. Notice of intent, Cindy Singer. All right, then.
Good evening.
What do we have, Lisa? Oh, there's Tom.
Yep. So Tom Hughes with Hughes Environmental Consulting here with Lisa Mead on behalf of Cindy Singer, and I believe Cindy's out there as well. Um, so when we had our last hearing, there were some questions about both the regulatory analysis and the and some questions on the narrative. In particular, I had referred to an appraisal which was in uh, error. So I've corrected those elements and clarified the narrative. Lisa has reviewed the regulatory analysis.
Tom,
Yes.
Tom, excuse me, just 1 minute. Mr. Chair, since you
Yeah.
are all virtual tonight and we can't see anyone and it's also the law, would you mind taking a an attendance?
Not at all.
Thank you.
All right, let's see here. Let's do the roll call. Steve Moore,
Here,
Dan Warshaw,
here.
Barb Riley. Barb Riley is not here. Janet Daisley,
Present here.
uh, Julia Godfreyson. Oh, she looks like she just
I'm
came.
here.
Okay,
Here.
and the chair is here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Sorry, Tom, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, that's fine. So we have submitted the updated regulatory analysis, and we went through every section uh, of the regs, and we distinguished and clarified why the deck dock structure down by the water is not required to meet other sections, and why it falls under the section that we have said it does, uh, and went through how the regulations allow replacement without additional elevation. We also found one example where the commission has in the past allowed a reconfiguration of 2 decks into 1 deck, a slight actual expansion within the velocity zone, 5 feet below the flood elevation, and that was a complete replacement. So we cited that example in there as well. Um, in addition, we clarified some things. So while an appraisal wasn't done on the house is assessed at over $1.4 million, and it's pretty obvious that the deck project will not exceed the 50%. The garage project, the garage is only assessed at 15,100. As I note in the narrative, the work within the garage is not an alteration, but that's something that we would like to ask the commission just to condition to address the substantial improvement where we will address that prior to the polling of a building permit. The building inspector commented fairly late into the filing, after we've received our zoning approval and everything, that the garage work will need more proof with regard to substantial improvement, and in particular the bathroom. So we're willing to, not do that until we've provided that information. But in order to do that, we need a contractor on board, and we need to be further down the road with the overall project before we can actually provide that information on the garage. So with that, I mean, I'm happy to go through the regulatory analysis. I did provide a red line strikeout version of it, so you can easily see the changes that were made. I don't know if you want to, we could pull it up on the screen and go through it, or I can answer questions, however you'd like to proceed. Lisa, I don't know if you have anything you want to add
No,
along those lines.
yeah, I think it's important actually if the commission wouldn't mind to have Tom go through the regulatory analysis, because we believe that the deck that's over the revetment certainly falls within your regulations and can be approved by the commission. And I believe that Tom has some comments relative to some other plantings and things like that that I think would be important for the commission to hear, if that would be acceptable.
Does anybody have any qualms about doing that?
No, is this the material that was just submitted yesterday?
Yes, it is.
Okay, I have not had a chance to look at it, so I'm not going to vote on it tonight, but I'm willing to listen to it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
we
so
won't
maybe
vote on it tonight.
yeah, so maybe at least if we can walk through, look at the red line, strike out, we can talk about the individual sections, and then if if you need more time to review it and think it through, then that's fine. But at least let's at least walk through it, and and with Lisa here, hopefully we can answer some of the questions that were asked at the last meeting, if they're not answered by what we present.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so if we can go to the next page. So I added to the current site conditions the fact that the deck has these vertical boards on the water side, and I'll note that on permit plans from the commission from way back in the 2000s, those deck boards are actually called a bulkhead on those older permit plans. But those vertical boards primarily have served a couple purposes. One was to keep ice out from under, and I looked through the old notices, and the prior owner had talked about how when ice got in there, it would cause all kinds of damage, both to the revetment as well as to that structure, which has been there a long time. The other thing is that while those boards are just behind mean high water, that structure can be accessed by kayak during the sort of high tide events, and that does happen. The other thing is you do get people who kayak around the basin who come right up near it, and in order to keep people out of it, those boards do actually serve a purpose. So the next change, I just clarified that by structure I meant the stone revetment, as opposed to, I called it a structure. So I just wanted to make that a little clearer. So we can go on. If we want to stop there again, I just tried to clarify. I was talking about the revetment on-site limits the dune function, and then the language in these sections is really just clarifying what you're reading, and in the next one it was just removing an extra space. If we can just move on. And I also did bold and italics, which we don't have to focus on too much. Okay, so in here, I clarified, the commission had wanted us to clarify the most likely route of access, how that would work. And the most likely way to access this would be down the end of 64th Street. And after the last hearing, we did conduct an additional site visit with a couple members and the agent. And we did look at that area, and it is a little bit uneven. It's sort of been blown out a little bit from people walking down there, and the sand kind of hollowing out. So we would nourish that, add clean sand to restore the dune and create a passable way for equipment, drive down in the dry, go along the beach with tracked, low pressure equipment. And we could actually build a sand ramp to bring any equipment up onto the upland part of Five Basin from there, and that could be used to install the helical piles, to install the piles for the deck attached to the building, and to do the revetment work. And there would be some need for working down at the bottom of the revetment, but that work could all be done during the dry. And sand could be brought in by sort of power wheelbarrows from the street, or using low pressure, tracked equipment from that 64th Street side as well. But we do note that when we choose a contractor, they will finalize an access plan, and then we're asking that ultimately that be conditioned, as to be approved by the conservation agent. The dock, we talk about, the dock. I just clarified that, when it's low tide, the float will be elevated above the substrate, which is the Department of Marine Fisheries, as well as the Army Corps guidance. And then in terms of redevelopment, the redevelopment standard, as I think you're all familiar, in a couple places, both in the definition of redevelopment and in the exclusion from what can be counted as development and redevelopment, anything that results in a net increase of less than 20% is excluded from being considered as new development or redevelopment by the regulations. So we just are clarifying that we are 19.9%, and we are not, we're not going past that standard. So this is all allowable work. For plantings, we've talked about that before. There's really no plantings to speak of within the footprint of the revetment, and the area where the work is going to occur on the upper floor deck. We're going to be putting piles right through the existing surface, and we're not envisioning any damage to that area. I did during the last site visit, there was a question as to whether or not we could put some additional native plantings out. There is a planting bed that extends on the north side of the property, and another one on the south side of the property. On the north side, we're willing to extend that further towards the revetment, and plant that extension of it with some native plants. It would either be multiple smaller shrubs like lowbush blueberry, or perhaps one amelanchier or something along those lines. On the south side, there's an existing sort of landscape mulch bed, and we're looking at adding some native plants within that, and maybe removing mulch from a portion of that closest to the water and closest to the area of revetment where the deck is being removed from. You may remember that in order to make the deck more resilient, we're proposing to lift it up and reconfigure the square footage without increasing it, so that we're able to lift it up a foot higher in combination with the use of the through-flow decking and the helical piles to make it more resilient. If we can go to the next page. Okay, so we've been through the Wetland Protection Act thing. I did want to clarify to the difference between the new deck being added to the home and and the waterside deck. So there's some language in there just to clarify what I was talking about. In some cases, on a reread, it wasn't as clear as I had intended. So we can go to the next. Okay, so here's the ordinance, and going through the ordinance. So starting here, all new buildings and substantial improvements to existing buildings should be built on open piles and comply with FEMA. So, and you cite section 744, which has been superseded by Appendix G. When you wrote this, that Appendix G didn't exist. And what's key is when you look at Appendix G, they define the word structure as a walled and roofed building. So the standalone deck dock structure is not subject to those elevation requirements of Appendix G. And prior to that would not have been subject to section 744. And that's essentially what that section clarifies now. The next section, I clarified what the assessed value of the building is, which is $1,476,800, and clarify that we're not increasing the square footage of the structure by 25% with regards to the 25 and 50 rule on the house and the deck components. Okay, if we can continue down. Okay, so here I just noted that the requirement that we were discussing does not apply to the deck replacement over the revetment, just to the new deck off of the house. And that is because the section that we're talking about does not actually fall under this section. It's not a building or a substantial improvement or an expanded footprint within the definitions that you include in the ordinance and the regulations. And similar, in fact, more compliant than arguably than the other project that we cited. We're not expanding this deck. We are reconfiguring the footprint a little bit in order to be able to lift it up a foot, again, making it more resilient. And then, as we point out, if the deck was damaged by a storm, we'd be able to replace it by right, by the language that's in the ordinance. If we can continue down. Okay, so here, so in terms of the elevation of the deck by an additional foot, the use of through-flow decking, the helical piles are essentially ensuring that we are not having an adverse effect on flows in the floodplain. The structure as it exists now has an effect, and what we're proposing will have less of an effect. So, so we meet that section. If we can continue down. And then I clarified here that, so this revetment has been there for decades and decades, and it was licensed as an existing structure, but we're required to maintain it, and the slope has been knocked around and adjusted, and it's no longer per the licensed plan condition, and we're required to maintain it. And in order to maintain it properly, we need to have the materials be such that they're going to better withstand the forces that are there. So the improvements are not to bring it, the improvements in materials are not to bring it to some aspect of the Chapter 91 plan, but it's in the spirit of needing to maintain these structures. And if you find that the structures are getting beat up too often, Chapter 91 typically expects you to improve on the design to avoid that, and that's what we're doing. And I think you guys, most of you know Lisa O'Donnell, who's a really good structural engineer, and she has evaluated this and come up with a plan that makes sense and will minimize the need for additional maintenance in the future. So if we can go down, then we go through the regulations. So here we talk about how this section does not apply to the deck over the revetment since it's not a building. This is one of those sections that is talking about, elevated on pilings and all that. And the standard applies to a building, and you define a building as a structure with a roof and walls. Since the deck that we are adding on to the house is attached to the building, you could possibly interpret it that would have to apply to that. In this case, we are elevating that deck and fully compliant with all the elevation standards for a building on the deck that's being added to it. But with regard to the deck by the water, this section does not apply. Okay, if we can go to the next section or the next markup. Okay, so here, here's where we're just asking that you condition the garage work because 15.1, a garage on Plum Island, we're certain is going to appraise at a higher value, but we just don't have the builder in line in order to do all the estimates and everything right now. But the bathroom and the garage is not a major element of this project that we would want to, wait out and have this thing get extended for too long to address. So we're hoping that can just be conditioned. And then again, the next section, elevation above flood level, elevation above ground level. Again, this applies to buildings. This does not have a roof. It doesn't have walls. It's not a building, so that section does not apply. If we can continue down. Here, the lattice section, what we have done is there was some questions and some concern about the bulkhead portion of the deck, the solid boards that are along the water side. Even if you were to see them as an enclosure, the bottom of those boards is 3 feet above the beach, which is the nearest ground level. I don't consider the revetment the ground, and we can open that up 50% and still provide that safety of not having a kayaker who's kayaking by the structure kind of get sucked in underneath, or somebody who's actually trying to pull up to it during the during a higher tide have an issue with it going under. So we're willing to then just open that up to 50%. That would comply with this section, even if you believe it applies. And arguably, I believe we can replace that under the deck section, but that's not something that's worth going back and forth on, where we, clearly if this section, if there is a section that addresses those boards, it would be this section. And I believe we comply with it once we open it up 50%. Excuse me, 50%.
Tom, since you're adding a dock, there won't be any kayakers coming up to this deck, I would assume. So,
well, so first of all, you get a lot of people who kayak around the edge of the basin, and it just is not a safe situation to have an open structure right at the edge like that, where a kayak could go under. And just because you have a dock where a boat can tie up or a kayak can tie up doesn't mean that people aren't going to pull up in their kayaks and, talk to people who are up in the yard. And, it's something that it would serve the purpose of both the boater safety, but also helping to keep the ice out from under it, which I think is still a good idea. And it is opening it up. And when compared to current conditions, it's an improvement. It's not an adverse effect.
Okay, well, I'm not convinced on this one, so
Okay.
go ahead.
Yeah.
Can I actually follow up on that?
Yeah, go ahead, Julie.
So Tom, I'm confused because you keep talking about kayaks pulling up to this deck and that it needs these lattice boards, which typically we look at that regulation around lattice, around sort of more on the land type of structures. But this, I'm confused as to why we're not calling this one, maybe another dock. Two, why are we not looking at coastal beach or bank as resource areas here? Because clearly the way you're talking about this deck and the location of the deck is that it's over water much of the time, or at a minimum over beach, which you indicated, and bank, which is the revetment. So we haven't looked at those resource areas yet. You've been referring to this as a dune impact.
Yeah, we've first of all, I have to go back to the analysis under the Wetland Protection Act. I believe I do talk about coastal beach, but the coastal beach impacts are limited to the temporary impact during work, and we talk about how the beach will be restored. The sand that is covering the toe of the revetment will be put aside and put back to match surrounding grade. And we do address those performance standards. As I said, the structure, I mean, it does serve a dock-like function, and we can call it a dock. That's fine. We have, up until recent years, called hardened slope on the basin side coastal bank. You may recall that DEP has told us we can't do that. They acknowledged that it acts more like a coastal bank, but it is more a dune with diminished function than a coastal bank because if you read the definition, you can't have dune and coastal bank.
Right.
So,
But so it is though coast. If you had to define the revetment, it would not be dune, it would be coastal bank, correct?
no, it can't be coastal bank because of the definitions, and DEP has made that clear. So what it is, for example, on the South Shore, working on a dune that had a revetment on it, the Southeast region had us actually file something called a determination of non-significance on the revetment itself to say that it was not dune, basically not performing in the interest of dune.
Right.
So the
But
revetment
is it not performing? I get that it's not dune. I'm arguing that it's coastal bank. It does perform the functions of coastal bank. That's what I'm asking.
so
And given where it's located, I mean, you said it's mean high water, it's people are kayaking by there. It has a lot of characteristics that I would say are the definition of coastal bank. I'm just trying to, it's like we're talking about this deck in a lot of different ways, and it doesn't seem to fit any of those criteria. It seems to be more like a dock.
Well, and right, and we've talked about this is a fairly unique structure for Plum Island, and the resource area in the definitions. If I pull up the Wetland Protection Act definition of coastal bank, it excludes dune, and since we are on a barrier beach, DEP considers from beach to beach to be dune and barrier beach, and therefore it can't have coastal bank. And that's what they've told us on other projects. So what it is it is a structure that was built on top of dune. The dune beneath it, as I describe in the existing conditions part, is entrained, so it's not active. It's not performing functions as dune. So under the Wetland Protection Act, it's evaluated in terms of adverse effect on dune function. And so the replacement of it doesn't adversely affect the dune function that exists because it doesn't really exist within that footprint. And the coastal beach is essentially a veneer of sand over stone that would be impacted, and that will be restored back to what it is. and it has some limited function, but that function is not curtailed by our project. It is, there's temporary impacts related to the construction, and we do talk about that, I believe, in the Wetland Protection Act analysis. And what I'm going through and what I prepared for tonight was this discussion of of the red line, but I can go back if you want and dig deeper
No.
into that. But
I think it's in some ways it's irrelevant what we call it. In this case, you can move forward. I just wanted to try and clarify that in my head because of the way you were talking about kayaks pulling up to it,
Yeah.
etc.
Yeah, I mean, it's been something that that Cindy has kayaked off of it or pulled up and grabbed a cooler off the deck at at a high enough tide, and then at other times of the tide, the kayaks are carried down those stairs, which the Chapter 91 license includes. And interestingly enough, in the Chapter 91 process, going back through the records, that deck was shown, and then DEP had it removed because it was behind mean high. Had it removed from the plans as part of it. While the commission approved a vast expansion of the deck, it was actually approved to be built all the way down to from property line to property line. But regardless of that, the ordinance, as I believe you pointed out at the last hearing we had, the Wetland Protection Act is all well and good, but the ordinance is different. And the ordinance applies to Plum Island and doesn't really distinguish between coastal bank and dune with regard to the Plum Island performance standards. So we're looking at the Plum Island performance standards as it relates to this. And, I think if we can continue down, we can have further discussions about these vertical boards if you guys would like. But let's continue down through and then maybe have some more discussion about this. So we had talked about this prior hearings, but the spiral stairs have to come down. I believe code requires it to go on a small pad, and you guys have allowed that kind of thing in the past. But we are willing to explore gravel or clamshell options and do the least impactful and most compatible dune material that is allowed by the building code. So if the commission wanted to put a condition to that effect, we're willing to do that, but we will have to put in whatever the building code requires at the base of those stairs. And then here's the deck section. And so the important thing to understand in reading through this section is this is the section where the performance standards of deck are. And elsewhere in the ordinance, there's differentiation between new development, redevelopment, replacement, and expansions. And so when you don't put replacement in these standards, then it doesn't mean that it's new. It means that you're just allowing that to occur. So as you read through these, what this section kind of says is, okay, if you have an existing deck, you can replace it, you can fix it, you can modify it. If you expand it, your expansion has to meet these elevation requirements. If you build a new one, it has to meet the elevation requirements. If you have an existing one, depending on how much work you're doing, you can either get an administrative approval from the conservation agent, you can file an RDA, or you can file an NOI. And that is what this performance standard basically says. The deck is not a new deck. There's been a deck there for decades, and no pun intended there. But so we're looking to replace it, and the ordinance recognizes through its language in other sections that there are such things as replacements that are different than new. And in this case, we identify a project at 5 Harbor Street. There were 2 small decks on the back of the building. They were completely ripped off, new piles put in, and a larger deck. It was actually cantilevered out a little bit, that filled in a void between the two. But essentially, it was a geometric reconfiguration of an existing deck that the commission used some discretion to call not an expansion. And it was allowed to be replaced at the elevation it was, 5 feet below the BFE. The if we go through this, we note that this section doesn't prohibit replacement of dock. It simply just creates a streamlined procedure if your replacement doesn't include ground disturbance. And if we can go maybe to the next.
Wait, can we stop? Wait, before
Yep.
we move on, I just want to, I'm not sure I totally agree with how you characterize these regulations for decks. Did you say that you think that it says that replacement decks are allowed?
Yes.
Okay, so
It's black and white.
where does it say that you can replace an existing deck in the same way that it was before?
Because in the section where you say that things need to be elevated differently, you don't apply that to replacement. You're only applying that to new and expansion.
Well, this is new. So that's where I'm not sure why I think we're coming at this from very different readings of what these regulations say. When you take something down and put something new up in its place, even if it's replacing what was there before, that's a new structure. That's the way I read it. That's the way we read it when it's a house. If you take down the house and build a new house, it has to go up on pilings. This is taking down an existing deck. Yes, you're replacing it, but it's a new deck. Everything is new. There's nothing
So
that's just
in the-
expanded. It's the
In
whole
this,
thing.
yeah, in this section on buildings, in the ordinance,
Right.
it does specify that a replacement has to be elevated.
Yeah.
Okay. And because it specifies there that a new house, and a replacement house or building have to be elevated, and yet here it doesn't specify replacement, that first of all, the ordinance then, by specifying a replacement building, needs to be elevated separately from the specification that a new building has to be elevated. It is differentiating between replacement and new.
Well, I think this is very much just your interpretation. It's your opinion on how you would interpret what these things are saying. There is just as valid another way to look at it, which is that when something is built new, it should be elevated and meet the performance standards for something within that flood zone. There is a definition for structure in our regulations, which includes decks, and structures that are replaced or expanded need to be elevated. So I'm seeing something very different than you are. I hear how you're interpreting it, but I do disagree that that's what the intent and the meaning of the regulations is.
Well, actually, in the regulations, the definition of structure includes the foundational part of a deck. It doesn't actually include the deck itself, if you read the definition in the regulation.
And you don't think that is meant to include the deck itself? It includes the boards, it includes the surface, and it includes the footing. So you don't think that that includes the whole deck?
I'm just saying that the definition talks
I read
about
the definition. Anyway.
So, but regardless of that, that is not really germane to the discussion on this. This is, how do you read from a regulatory point of view and a legal point of view the performance standards? And we've been through this in detail, and Lisa Mead and her firm have poured through the ordinance and the regs to make sure that we're on solid ground with how we're reading it. And Lisa, I don't know if you want to add to this issue of replacement versus new.
Yeah, I actually use the raise hand symbol, which I never usually do. So I hear what you're saying, Julia, but the problem is that in what Tom's trying to say is that where you have a set of regulations or ordinances that lists things and uses a list to describe what's covered and what's not covered. And then where they omit that particular word, in this instance, replacement, in another section, you can't put it back in. It violates statutory construction. So what Tom is saying is that because under your DEC's performance standards, you don't list replacement as not being permitted, then it's permitted. Because in other sections, you specifically talk about what you need to do with replacement. And that's the difference. And I'm happy to give you a memo on the statutory construction of it.
Yeah, I would appreciate that because to me, that's certainly not the intent of what these right. And I think you would agree that given how we treat structures and buildings and when there's more than a substantial improvement, the whole thing has to go up on pilings. The
But
intent
that's,
is,
yeah, but you actually say that,
you know,
right?
I know,
You
I agree that we say that. And so there's a word maybe that is inconsistent between different parts of the regulations that now you're assembling to read something into this deck section. I just think it's important to have that made very clear. So if you can put that in a memo.
Yeah, I can, yeah.
I don't think that it actually was the intent. And so moving forward, if that is how it should be read or is going to be read, I think we need to understand why and really be clear about that moving forward.
And
I'm happy to do that for you, and I certainly understand that. And I think it, and because of your comments, I think it was the last time we really dove into this, and in particular the performance standard under DECs, and then all of the the subheadings under the ordinance related to what's permitted, what's not permitted, and how it's listed out, and how they're listed. For example, repair or replacements of open pilings, construction, repair, or replacement of decks on open pilings with at least 2 feet above grade. And you go on that whole list. You have to read it all as a comprehensive law, so to speak. And then you have to read it and interpret it the way it's written, particularly where lists are used. And when there is a word omitted from a list, you're not allowed to insert if it doesn't exist. And I'm happy to provide that to you.
yeah. And Julia, from a policy point of view, especially when this was written, MACC was encouraging decks in coastal dunes because they tend to remove human disturbance from areas. And you have to remember that there are a large number of homes on Plum Island who have a first floor that's a foot above grade within a velocity zone on a fairly low elevation, and their means of egress is over a deck. And I think saying that those decks, when they become unsafe, can't be replaced and kind of forcing people to continually scab on a board and just try to make it do is inconsistent with the other requirements of the
This
of
is a
the
very
ordinance.
very different situation than that. So I'd prefer not to
Well,
compare
but
apples to oranges.
But you haven't differentiated between standalone decks and attached egress decks. And maybe if you're going to clarify that, that's something that you guys as a commission can consider. But I would disagree that it doesn't make sense from a policy point of view to allow people to replace existing decks within their existing footprint when if you have a house and you're not doing a substantial improvement and you're just trying to maintain safe egress in and out of it over a deck and maintain a deck at the level of the first floor when the whole building is within the V zone, you have
Again,
to.
that's not like I'd prefer to just stay with this project. We were talking about
Right, understood. But right
Yeah.
now, your regulations were written, I believe, to allow that situation that I'm talking about, and they did not differentiate between that or a standalone deck. And given that the regulations do allow this to be replaced, you know, as we've stated, and Lisa's kind of clarified from the legal interpretation how you go through and read these regs. So I don't know if we want to continue down further.
Just
And
a question for Kelsey. Have we received an opinion from the city solicitor yet?
No, that the memo that I drafted back, I think in November, addressed to the city solicitor has not gone anywhere because the city has changed or is in the process of changing legal firms. So unfortunately, I'm not clear at this point if we can expect to receive feedback. I'm hoping we can, but as of today, I think we still don't have new legal counsel.
Okay.
okay, and this is where I talked about the general policy point of view, that it does make sense to consider decks differently from an elevation point of view. And I would even argue, you know, a deck such as this to have recreation space by the water, especially where it's existed for decades, to replace something in kind, especially when it can be improved as we are. Obviously, if we lift it up above BFE, it's 10, 11 feet up in the air. That's, you know, kind of silly. But we are doing something to try to make it more resilient, trying to improve upon it, changing the decking over, changing how it's held in with helicals rather than just posts into the revetment, and you know, elevating it a little bit so it's at least more resilient to the king tide storms and the you know, and the increases in sea level that are affecting the area. And then we can continue on through this. And then I don't know, just clarifying. I think I put a hyphen in there. Nothing.
Tom, could you just slow down going through these land subject to coastal storm flowage? Where we get, where is it where it gets to the V zone?
Yeah, I've got that addressed, and that was that argument about, and the discussion about, it's an existing structure, and I believe that your regs say that it's likely to have an effect if it doesn't have that elevation, but it's measured as an adverse effects standard, and we have an existing condition, and you have to compare the proposed condition to the existing condition. And because we're lifting it up, putting in the through flow decking, and improving upon the foundation, and in this case, now opening up the slats 50%, we're improving upon the function of the floodplain resource and not having an adverse effect compared to the existing condition.
And you believe that that implies that you have to compare it to the existing condition?
Yes, because your standard is written as an adverse effects standard. So you have to look at the existing condition and the proposed condition.
Well, it's an adverse
And-
effect on the interests, on the protected interests. It doesn't
Right.
say.
No, but the way there's plenty, and I'm sure Lisa can further kind of explain this, but an adverse effects standard has a long history of how you do that. Is you look at existing function, and then you look at proposed function, and whether you're adversely affecting the resource. Your baseline is not no structure and no deck. Your baseline is the existing condition.
Okay.
Right? And so we will affect the resource less than the current condition, so there is no adverse effect. But it means if we went in and tried to build this new, the burden would be much higher on making that case.
Mhm.
So if there were no deck there at all, and we were just trying to come in and construct something. It doesn't mean we couldn't overcome it. But it just, because you don't conclude that it does, there's not a presumption that it does impact. It's the presumption is that it likely impacts.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. And I'm sorry, I'm not the one scrolling. So like, but yeah. So,
Yeah, that's me. Are we good to go to the next markup?
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was breezing through this, Julia, mainly because there's no red line strikeout really to speak of in here. It's like a couple little cleaning up of formatting and things, but
Mhm.
Might have been it.
um,
Mhm.
so so that's it. I mean, I think the regulatory analysis is sound. The legal basis for it is sound. Lisa has, really gone through this, and we're really comfortable. This is a very clean legal and regulatory argument that supports approving the project. And if the commission wants to seek, you know, the legal opinion, then, we'd ask that, we try to get that, going and done. And however, I think we've given you the information on which to base a decision. This thing is, it is fairly unique currently. There aren't a lot of licensed, uh, coastal engineering structures out on Plum Island. There are several, but there aren't a lot. And I'm not sure how many others have a deck on them.
Yeah, I think what might be helpful to the commission, and correct me if I'm wrong. So if I'll give you this memo on the statutory interpretation, and then I think we'll include the difference between a deck and a dock, right? Because there is a difference between a deck and a dock, and I think um, once you see that, you'll understand why this is a deck and not a dock. We've actually go back and forth about this a lot, but it's certainly a deck and not a dock, given the definition of a dock.
But you're using it as a dock, or the owner is.
Well,
It's used to
I mean,
access the water. That is true, but
yeah, but it's not over water. Right.
Well,
And so, and I'll
well,
give you,
Well,
so,
ice goes under it, so water is going under it.
yeah,
And
we'll
waves.
provide that. We'll provide that to you.
I mean, if it's easier for you guys for us to call it a dock, I mean, at high water, there is water under it. At a mean high, there's not. At a low high, there's not.
So then why are these vertical boards needed again if it's only very rare
Because
that water's going
because
under there?
because the vertical boards are like almost exactly at mean high water, and mean high is exactly that. It's mean. So there are plenty of tides where the water is a foot or more higher than mean high, and sometimes 2 feet higher, and right up so you can put a kayak in off this thing and go right in. Or at the very least pull up against it and, put something down on the structure or deck or dock or whatever we want to call it, or pick something up or, come say hello to people. And the other thing is that in those conditions, we also do, the basin is an area where people do like to kayak around or go around with, inflatables and things. And there is a risk that if, especially if we're lifting it up further, that we could have, kayaks or boats end up under it, which wouldn't be a safe condition.
I guess the last thing I would say, or the feedback I would like to hear, we've so concentrated on the deck over the revetment. We haven't heard much feedback from the commission on the deck attached to the house. I think that's pretty straightforward, and so I'd like to get a little feedback on that just to make sure everybody's comfortable with that part of the application.
Yeah, I personally don't have any issue with it.
Nor do I.
Yeah.
Either.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. If there's anybody that does, if you could let us know now, that would be helpful so we can make sure in this additional information we give you, we address it.
I do think we should just maybe point out that because you're at 19.9% increase in footprint, that there should be a special condition or a special perpetual condition related to future increases in the footprint on site.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. I don't think there's an issue with that.
Okay. It's just helpful in the future
Yeah,
to have that memorialized.
for sure. And then the next thing is, I guess, I don't know what the deal is with the city solicitor. I do know that supposedly there's one coming on soon. And Karis is wrapping up. So if we, hopefully the changes that Tom made clarify this regulatory analysis, which I think it does. And I'm happy to, by Tuesday, give you the memo, if not before, related to regulatory interpretation. And so we'd hope that we could perhaps have a meeting at your next meeting to hopefully wrap this up.
Can I ask a question about the garage then in that case? You mentioned that the building commissioner's office wants additional evidence that the work to the garage is not going to be a substantial improvement. Am I understanding?
Yeah, that's correct.
In particular, they pointed out the bathroom, that the addition of the
Yeah.
bathroom in the garage, given, and I can't remember, I think they may have used an older assessment number. I think they may have said 12,000, but it's assessed right now at 15.
Mhm.
And the concern is, that could go over.
Yeah.
We're not,
Yeah.
the plan is not to have a fancy bathroom. It's really
Mhm.
just to have a place that people don't have to go in the house to use.
Right.
So we're
I'm just,
confident.
I'm just thinking, I understand you guys are confident about that, but given that that's a remaining question, that's actually a pretty big question, given that depending on which way that comes out, and your confidence is going to come out one way, but the fact that the reason why it's being asked is because they feel like it's
Yeah,
questionable enough that's a huge question mark for us too, then in that case, because would change a lot. So I can't imagine
Tom, hang on a second.
conditioning
So,
an approval on that.
yeah,
Right?
so Julia, that's a completely fair question. So the question for us, or the request of us, is that you have a condition that says we can't do the garage unless the building commissioner signs off that it's not a substantial improvement.
No, I get that. I mean, I just don't. I'm never in favor, and the other commissioners may be more comfortable with it, of approving something with conditions that are that significantly possible changes that rely on someone else's decisions and might radically change something, because it's just not a clean order of conditions at that point. We still don't actually know what we're getting at that point. So I'd prefer to wait. That's just me.
So I think I'd like the commissioners to talk about to discuss this at the next meeting, because there's this inside the garage, right? So it's not like there's any disturbance. So I totally understand what you're saying, and we're happy to have that discussion. But so that was our proposal, is that you condition it on the fact that if it's not determined by the building commissioner to be not a substantial improvement, that it doesn't happen. But that's fine.
But see, it's almost like saying then that's us. I mean, if the building commissioner is determining whether or not it's a substantial improvement, then we are also needing to determine whether or not it's a substantial improvement. So that's our process just as much as it is the building commissioners. So that's a part of our regulatory review as well. So it's like asking us to issue an order of conditions before we're done with our regulatory
Yeah.
which doesn't
Well,
make any sense. So I
well,
don't feel comfortable with that at all, to be totally
would
honest.
you be open to the condition being that we would have to, before the bathroom was done, we would have to provide the substantial improvement information to the commission for review and approval? Because in all honesty,
We would
we
just
could
wait
pull,
and confer with the building commissioner. I mean, I think both have to agree.
right. The problem comes that it's such a small part of the project, and the applicant would like to move forward with, you know, with the other elements sooner rather than later. And in order to address that, we need to get an appraisal done of the garage, and we need to get a contractor on board, um, and do a lot of things that are just going to cause a lot of delay. And we're hoping to not delay everything else. And in this case, while it is a big regulatory decision, is it or is it not a substantial improvement? If the answer is it's substantial improvement, it's something that the client is fine with. We just don't do the bathroom. Um, so it isn't like it's a risky
Mm.
condition to take, because if the result doesn't end up well, I mean, I guess the other option we would have, which I would prefer not to do, but would be that we could always withdraw the bathroom from the NOI and file an RDA with the substantial improvement stuff when we get to it, but it just adds another regulatory step. So,
Well, so just quickly, you mentioned that you'd need a contractor to come on board to get the details that you need for that substantial improvement determination, but you also apparently need the contractor to come on board to determine how they're going to access the site to do the work for the rest of the remaining work too, the revetment work, et cetera. And to me, that's pretty significant. That's construction phase impacts that haven't yet been defined at all. And talking about coming in from 64th Street, like over whose property on the beat, like there's a lot of questions there too, that if you need a contractor for that, that's additional potential impact information for this board. So, I mean, how are you proposing to get us that without a
well,
contractor?
we've given you the default that we're looking for the approval for is the going down 64th, which is a city right away. We would add sand to it, so we would nourish it, and we would restore any impacts. I mean, we've given you that route, which we are pretty comfortable is going to be what's used. But if a contractor is going to come in, and each contractor is going to have nuances of that, so we're saying that they're going to have to put together an access plan and submit it. If it's drastically different from that, then we would come back to the commission with a change to the access.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, so Tom, if you were to use 64th Street, you would have to go in front of one house before you get to 5 Basin Street. Is that correct?
Right.
And I don't remember what was there, whether it was just sand or if there was salt marsh or what was there.
So that was one you may recall during the site visit. We talked about it when they did some work on that house. This commission required them to remove an existing revetment, and there is nothing there. It is like beach to the house. And so basically, once we get down on that, it's just a drive over a sand beach that, the tracks would be cleaned up, with the first tide cycle. So the idea, and this happens quite frequently, both for any work in the basin area as well as other similar landforms. You get out on the beach during the dry and you get off the beach. So you go out on the outgoing tide, you come back on the incoming. And in this case, what I would envision we would do is we would essentially build a sand ramp down over the existing shoreline to be able to bring equipment back up onto the property, or the equipment would just drive right back 64th and get onto a trailer and be brought off site, till the next workday.
Okay, my recollection of that 64th Street was It was kind of steep and narrow. I don't know how.
Yeah, it was, you may remember it wasn't so much that it was narrow and it's not wide, but we certainly can get a piece of equipment, a mid-size or smaller excavator, a mini or whatever can get down there pretty easily. Bobcat could get down there. But it's hollowed out where people are walking. And what we would do is add clean, compatible sand to essentially restore that dune volume and flatten it, so it would essentially be a flat, drivable surface. And then restore anything when we were done. We would document, before we start work, document it with photographs and wetland scientist monitoring, and then when it's all done, it would be restored to the city's satisfaction.
Okay.
Okay, anybody else got questions?
I just wanted to also remind everybody that I'm not going to be at the next meeting, and I don't know how that might affect the quorum vote on this if it were to be voted on for the next meeting. So you might want to think about that.
And to Dan's point, I'm not going to be here either.
Well, that certainly puts a damper on that meeting.
Is there the possibility of rescheduling? Like, are we the only agenda item that you really kind of got going right now? And if so, would it be possible for you to consider maybe the following Tuesday or, just rescheduling? Is there a better date for you guys?
I'll say that our current agenda for our next meeting is actually pretty full. That was something I was going to talk about at the end of this meeting. But we have 6 agenda items in addition to this one, I think, for the 17th.
So you're going to have a problem on the 17th, I think, Kelsey, right? So in the meeting after that would be March
3rd.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you're going to have a quorum issue at the 17th, and you got that many agenda items, it would be in your interest to schedule an interim meeting. So maybe you can.
Do we have a quorum issue?
We might have, as long as we have Barbara, and me and Steve and
They're all new items, aside from this one and the 20 Henry Graff. Everything else would be new.
Okay, well, I'm going to be in Mexico for the next 2 meetings. I do not know how well wireless works from there.
So maybe we will have a quorum issue.
Obviously, if I'm there, I'm there, but I can't guarantee it. I've never done it from there before.
So, and so, Mr. Chair, you're going to be gone essentially the 17th and the 3rd, right? Is that what you just said?
Yes. But what I can do, because I have other meetings too, and I want to maybe I can figure out some sort of a test run from there and see if my connection works okay.
So on the 17th, then you would have Janet and Dan would be gone. So then we would have Julia, Joe, Steve, and Barbara. Is that who you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. Will we have a new member by then, Kelsey?
That's right. We might. I haven't heard any update, but he was supposed to be approved at a recent city council meeting. So we might have a new member for the 17th.
I guess the issue for this project is if we will have enough members who've attended
For this project, yeah.
Right.
Whether we'll have a quorum for this project, and it doesn't sound like we will.
So let me ask for the 3rd. Who's at risk of not attending on the 3rd? Anybody?
It would be the same for me, but
I'll be
You
here
have
on
more
the
time to
3rd.
figure out the internet.
you say you're going to be there, Dan?
Yep. God willing.
Janet, will you be available on the 3rd?
Yes, I'm back in the country then. I'm out of the country for 2 weeks,
Okay.
somewhere where I won't have internet, thank God. But I will be here on the 3rd.
And then Julia, you're going to be around?
Yeah, I should be here for the next two meetings, for sure.
And Barbara. I think we might be safer to go to the 3rd.
Okay.
Well, I mean, the good news with that is I guess that gives us a little more time to make sure that, if you guys are going to go to the solicitor for further feedback, that, I think we'll want to move it on the 3rd. So hopefully,
Mm.
especially with that extra time, hopefully you can get whatever feedback.
Yeah, and it would be super helpful. I guess if we do get a new city solicitor or can get some legal advice, it would be great to have that memo that you were talking about, Lisa, just to give them. I mean, this was an updated regulatory analysis, but I think something that really it directly explains that interpretation that we were discussing regarding building versus structure versus replacement versus not, all that.
Yep. Yeah, well, I'll try to, notwithstanding the fact that we wouldn't be meeting till the 3rd, I'll try to get that still to you the 1st of next week.
That'd be awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, if
Right.
anybody else has any questions after reading the updated documents, then send them to Kelsey. And
Right.
she can
And if
move them on.
And I would ask if you guys send any questions to Kelsey that to the extent they could be shared with us, or if you want to ask questions through Kelsey, so we can try to give you whatever information you need to make to make it an informed opinion on the 3rd, so we can try to wrap this up. That'd be great.
Okay. Anything else for tonight? No? Okay. I'll take a motion to continue.
Do we need to ask the public?
I would if there was any public out there.
Okay, I'm sure there is. They're just not here.
Well, yeah, there is that. Yes, thanks for that clarification.
Okay, I'll make a motion to continue to the 3rd.
Second,
Okay, roll call. Steve Moore,
Yes.
Dan Warshaw,
yes.
Julie Godfredson,
Yes.
Janet Daisley,
Yes,
and I vote yes.
Thank you very much.
All
Thank
right, we'll
you.
see you
thank you.
third.
All right.
Good
Bye-bye.
night.
Good
Bye.
night. Thank
Thank
y'all.
All right. Let's approve let's discuss the meeting minutes from the January 20th, 2026 meeting. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
I don't know, Gretchen sent them out so early and I read them so long ago. I don't think I had.
They looked good to me.
Okay. Take a
Motion to approve?
Second.
Okay. Roll call, Steve Moore,
Yes.
Dan Warshaw,
Yes.
Julie Godfredson.
Yes.
Did we lose
Janet?
Janet? All right, I guess we lost Janet. Okay. And I say yes too. All right. Don't know what happened there, but Kelsey, you have some updates for us?
Yeah, and understanding some of you might not be around, but we did have 4 new filings come in. So I will be scheduling site visits for these probably next week. Joe, like you pointed out, maybe last meeting, there is a provision in our regs that says when it comes to wetlands delineations, we're not obligated to review those between, I think it's December 1st and April 1st. We can at our discretion. So, NOIs include delineations, some RDAs, certificates of compliance. Don't necessarily include review of a wetlands delineation. So that's a little more, it's not as clear that we have the right to delay review of those requests. So keeping that in mind, we have a request for a certificate of compliance for 3 Stanley Tucker Drive. This is now a building owned by Dry Air Systems. My understanding is the original order of conditions was issued to the previous building owner. They built an expansion of the building, a parking lot. They were supposed to build a rooftop stormwater system. Somehow that got lost within the sale of the building, and the new owner failed to build the rooftop stormwater system, but they came before the commission last year in the spring for a minor modification where they instead proposed to build that stormwater system underground, and that was approved. So we would be approving the as-built and confirming that everything else looks good. There's a snow cover right now, so again, I'll be scheduling these site visits, but if I think there might be some discretion there for the commission to say, we're not able to confirm the as-built because of the snow cover. The next is the city is looking to, through the water department, they're seeking an order of conditions. So they've submitted an NOI application to treat the upper and lower artichoke reservoirs with aluminum sulfate. And this is to treat cyanobacteria. So they're hoping to get these filings through both Newburyport. They're also going to file a separate NOI in West Newbury. So we've, received these documents. Of course, because there's so much on this agenda, I think maybe I'll send out an email before my staff report just listing everything. But that filing includes the comprehensive plan for the alum treatment. So health considerations, they did sediment analysis, all those kinds of things. And then in addition to that, we have 13 Hale Street, which we recently had for a really brief certificate of compliance. They're now coming back with a notice of intent to build a Tesla Megapack battery energy storage system. So this will be, in a way, similar to what we just looked at recently at 23 Low Street, but I think it's bigger. So we just received those plans. Those are the NOIs. We also have a new filing for an RDA. This is the sauna unit that I think we've talked about before on the northern end of Plum Island. They are arguing that it's not a structure and that there's no alteration of the resource area. So they only agreed to do an RDA, but that will be before the commission. So that's a lot, but I just wanted to put that out there tonight in case anyone feels strongly about attending any one of these. Just let me know. I haven't scheduled the site visits yet because I wanted to see if there was a day or a time that worked best. I'll probably be scheduling them for next week. So over the course of this week, if you want to reach out and let me know if there's any you're particularly interested in, maybe we can coordinate schedules.
I'd be interested in that sauna one.
Yeah, hopefully most people are. Yeah.
Me too. I'd go to that one.
I don't know what the snow cover situation is. I can drive by there and take a look because it's probably not worth our time if there's snow everywhere, but it is the island. So I'll let you know about that.
Okay. Would they have or would we have the plans, or would they were there here? I was gonna say, could they stake it out? No, those things are there. So yeah, that might be good.
We do have the kind of like a plan that I'll share of just how the saunas are constructed, all the materials present. Okay. But you're right. Yeah, apparently they're out there.
Okay.
Or one is out there.
Okay.
And that's it for updates, although Steve, you reminded me that we are supposed to get a new member, a grad student from UNH, and I have not received any updates on that. So I will definitely, I'm hoping he can join us for our next meeting, and I'll confirm that.
All right. Regarding the city solicitor, I'm also on the library board, and the city solicitor was supposed to give us a review of something at our last meeting, saying they weren't ready, but they would be ready for our next meeting, which is the third Wednesday of the month. So I think there is a new city solicitor. I'm not positive, but
do you know the firm? Because
no.
I haven't even got it. Yeah. I haven't even gotten a name.
But somebody there in City Hall must know.
Someone was okay. Yeah, I'll see if I can track that down. Andy is aware. Like I remind him weekly about this 5 Basin Street memo. So keep on it. That's it for me.
Okay. My only update is I'll be leaving Monday morning, so I won't be able to go any of those site visits. But
Safe
have
travels,
fun.
Joe.
Yeah.
Yeah, should be
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Enjoy it. Have a good trip.
Yep.
All righty.
Don't get sunburnt.
No, it's actually not that warm. I'm bringing my girlfriend a couple of warmer things down there because it's still a little cool.
Crazy.
Um,
Sure to warm up by the time you get there.
uh, sure. All right then.
Motion to
Take a
adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Oh,
Damn, you guys are rude. I'll second that though. All in favor? Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
All right, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you on the other
Good
side.
night.
Good night.
Night.
Good night.